Let me tell you something about the girl I was at 18. She was brave in all the wrong moments and careful in all the wrong places. She fell in love for the first time with someone she shouldn't have. Someone older, wiser, completely off limits. And she did what brave, foolish 18-year-olds do. She said it out loud. She was rejected. Gently, kindly, with all the right reasons. And she survived it. She packed the whole thing away and she walked forward and she built a new version of herself that was steadier and quieter and much, much more careful about who she let close. For 4 years, that version of herself held together perfectly. Until the morning she walked into her senior seminar, sat down in the third row, and realized that the woman she had never truly gotten over was standing at the front of the room. Marker in hand. Writing her name on the board. I was that girl. And this is what happened next. Let me tell you something about the moment your whole life splits in two. Not the dramatic kind of split. Not an earthquake or a car crash or a phone call in the middle of the night. I'm talking about the quiet kind. The kind that happens in an ordinary room on an ordinary morning when someone walks through a door, and something inside you, something you spent years carefully putting back together, simply cracks open again. That is how this story begins. Not with a bang. With a name. Written in blue marker on a white board. 7 letters that rearranged everything. My name is Mara Ellis. I am 22 years old. And I am telling you this story from the other side of the most painful, confusing, and ultimately beautiful thing that has ever happened to me. I'm going to tell you all of it. The embarrassing parts. The angry parts. The parts where I did not behave the way a reasonable person should. I am going to tell you because this story deserves to be told honestly. And because honesty, as it turns out, is the only thing that ever saved me. But before I tell you what happened in that classroom on that Thursday morning in September, I need to take you back. Back 4 years to the summer I was 18 years old. Back to the beginning of everything. Because you cannot understand what broke me without first understanding what built me. The summer I turned 18, my mother signed me up for a writing program at the City Arts Center. It was called Write Your Truth. 6 weeks. 11 students between the ages of 16 and 20. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 9 to noon, in a room with wide windows and mismatched chairs arranged in a circle. I didn't want to go. I was 18 and I thought I already knew everything worth knowing about myself. I was quiet. I was bookish. I preferred pages to people and always had. I wrote in journals that I kept under my mattress and I had exactly 3 friends and I was, by my own definition, perfectly fine. My mother looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Mara, you live so far inside your own head that one day you're going to forget to come out. Go, write, be around other human beings." So I went. And on the very first morning of that program, I walked into that room with the wide windows and the mismatched chairs. And a woman was standing at the front of it, writing something on a small portable whiteboard, and I stopped in the doorway without meaning to. I don't know exactly what it was. Even now, all these years later, I struggle to explain it precisely. It wasn't the way she looked, though she was striking in a quiet, unhurried way. Dark eyes, natural hair pulled back loosely, a plain white linen shirt like she had simply reached into her closet without thinking and somehow still managed to look like a painting. It wasn't even what she said when she turned around and noticed me frozen in the doorway and smiled. Just a simple, "Come in, find a seat." Nothing remarkable about those words at all. It was something underneath all of that. A quality. A stillness. The way certain people carry themselves like they have already made peace with who they are. And that peace radiates outward like warmth from a fire. You don't decide to move toward it. You simply find yourself closer than you were before. Her name was Camille Arden. She was 27 years old. She had a master's degree in comparative literature and she was 2 years into her doctoral research, and she had volunteered for this program 3 years in a row because, as she told us that first morning, she believed that young people who could tell the truth on a page could change things. could change themselves first and then maybe the world. She said it simply. Without performance. Like it was just a fact she happened to know. I wrote it down in my notebook and underlined it twice. By the second week, I understood that Camille Arden was unlike any adult I had ever encountered. She did not talk down to us. She did not offer empty praise. When your writing was lazy, she said so, gently but clearly, and then she told you exactly where it went wrong and exactly how to fix it. When your writing was brave, when you went somewhere real and raw and honest on the page, she would look up from your paper with an expression that I can only describe as recognition, like she was seeing something in you that you hadn't fully seen in yourself yet. He did that with me in the third week. I had written an essay about my father. About the year he got sick and the way our house changed, how it got quieter and smaller and heavier all at once, and how I had dealt with it by disappearing further into books and words in the private world inside my own head. I had written it quickly, almost carelessly, the night before it was due. I hadn't expected much from it. Camille handed it back to me on a Tuesday morning with more handwritten notes in the margins than I had ever seen on any paper anyone had ever returned to me. And at the top, in her clean, precise handwriting, she had written, "This is the most emotionally courageous piece of writing in this room. You go to the painful places without flinching. Most writers spend their entire careers learning how to do what you just did without thinking. Don't you dare stop." I read it 3 times sitting in that circle of mismatched chairs. I felt something shift in my chest, something opening that I hadn't known was closed. After class that day, she called me over while the other students filed out. "Your essay," she said, tapping the paper. "How did it feel to write it?" I thought about lying. Saying it was fine, it was easy, no big deal. That was what I normally did. Made small what was large, hid what was tender. But something about the way she asked, like the answer genuinely mattered to her, made me tell the truth. Like pulling something out of my chest, I said. Painful. But also like relief. Like I could breathe better after. She nodded slowly, like I had confirmed something she already suspected. "That," she said, "is exactly what writing is supposed to feel like." I walked home that afternoon in a kind of daze. And that night, lying on my bed staring at the ceiling, I made myself admit something I had been carefully not admitting for 2.5 weeks. I had a crush on Camille Arden. Not a small one. By week 5, it had grown into something I didn't have a word for anymore. I thought about her constantly. Not in an obsessive way, or maybe it was a little, but in the way that certain people get inside your thinking and rearrange the furniture without asking. I would read something and think, I wonder what she would say about this. I would write something and picture her reading it, her pen moving in the margins. I would sit in that circle on Tuesday and Thursday mornings and watch her talk. The way she used her hands when she was passionate about something, the way she paused before she said anything important, the way she listened to students like every word they said deserved her full attention. And I would feel something in my chest that was warm and aching and terrifying all at once. I knew it was complicated. I was 18. She was 27. She was my mentor and I was her student, and there was a line between us so clear and obvious that I would have needed to be completely blind to miss it. I was not blind. I saw the line. I understood the line. And I also understood by the end of week 5 that my feelings had already crossed it, quietly without my permission, and there was nothing I could do to bring them back. The last day of the program arrived on a Friday evening. There was a small graduation ceremony, parents and families crowding into the arts center, students reading their work aloud one final time, cheap sparkling juice in plastic cups, a slideshow that someone's parent had made with too many transition effects, and a song choice that made 2 people cry anyway. I sat through all of it with a feeling in my stomach like standing at the edge of something high. As I had made a decision. I had written a letter. It had taken me 4 drafts and 2 sleepless nights and more courage than I had ever spent on anything in my life. I had written it the way Camille had taught me to write. Plainly, honestly, without the protective layer of metaphor and careful distance. I had written what I felt exactly as I felt it, and I had folded it into a small square and put it in my pocket that morning and told myself that I would either give it to her or I wouldn't, and either way I would survive. Near the end of the evening, while everyone was distracted by the slideshow and the sparkling juice, I walked over to where her leather notebook sat on the corner of the facilitator's table. I slid the letter between the pages, and I walked away before I could take it back. 2 days later my phone rang. I saw her name on the screen and my heart stopped completely for 1 full second. I answered. Her voice was gentle, careful, the voice of someone carrying something fragile. "Mara," she said. "I read your letter." The pause that followed lasted 100 years. "I want you to know that I read it with complete respect. You are one of the most remarkable young people I have ever had the privilege of working with. Your honesty, your emotional intelligence, those things are real and they matter, and I do not take them lightly." Another pause. "But I have to say no. And I need you to understand why. Not because your feelings aren't real. I believe that they are. But you are 18 years old, Mara. You are standing at the very beginning of your life. And it would be wrong of me, it would be a profound failure of who I am and what I believe, to step into that beginning the way you're asking. You deserve to walk into your future without that weight. Do you understand?" I said yes. My voice was steady. I was proud of that in a distant, disconnected way. We said goodbye. I put the phone down. I sat on the floor of my bedroom for a long time without moving. And then I built a box inside my chest. The kind of box you build when you have no other choice. And I put everything inside it. The feelings. The letter. The memory of her handwriting in my margins. The sound of her voice saying your feelings are real. I locked it. I walked away. That was 4 years ago. 4 years. I went to university. I changed my major from journalism to English literature because words were still the only thing that felt like home. I made friends. I dated, briefly, carefully, never quite all the way. I learned how to be okay, and then I learned how to be better than okay, and eventually I stopped testing myself against the memory of that summer to see if it still hurt. Mostly it didn't. Mostly I was fine. It was the first Thursday of my senior year. My last required course, Contemporary Women's Literature, Section 4, 8 in the morning, 3rd floor of the Humanities Building. I arrived early, chose a seat in the 3rd row, slightly left of center, the way I always did. I pulled out my notebook. I uncapped my pen. Around me, other students filed in, coffee cups and backpacks, and the low murmur of people who didn't yet know each other. The door opened. And Camille Arden walked in. I need you to understand what happened in my body in that moment, because it wasn't what you see in movies. There was no gasp. No slow motion. No music swelling from somewhere. There was just stillness. A total, absolute stillness, like every system in me hitting pause at the exact same second. Like the world held its breath. She walked to the front of the room. She set her bag down. She was wearing a dark blazer and her hair was longer now, and she was older. Of course she was older. But she carried herself with the exact same settled, quiet certainty that I remembered from a room with wide windows and mismatched chairs. And my chest, that carefully constructed, perfectly locked chest, made a sound I felt more than heard. A crack, small but undeniable. Like ice at the beginning of spring. She picked up a marker. She turned to the whiteboard. And she wrote in clean blue letters. Professor C. Arden. She turned around. Her eyes swept the room, the routine scan of a professor cataloging her students. And then her gaze reached the 3rd row slightly left of center, and it stopped. For 2 seconds, exactly 2 seconds, I counted them, she went absolutely still. And I saw it. I saw the thing she didn't mean to show me. The recognition, yes, but beneath that, something more complicated. Something that moved across her face like a wave she was trying to stop with her bare hands. Then it was gone. Packed away. Replaced by the smooth, professional composure of a woman who was very, very good at keeping things in their place. She looked away. She cleared her throat. "Good morning. I'm Professor Arden. Welcome to Contemporary Women's Literature." Class had begun. I heard nothing she said. I sat in that chair for 50 minutes and I watched her teach, and I took notes that I would later discover were almost completely illegible, and the entire time there was only one thought running underneath everything like a current under still water. She's here. She's real. She is standing 10 feet away from me. And that box in my chest is not as locked as I thought it was. After class I was slow to pack up. Not subtle about it. I'm not going to pretend it was subtle. I was the last student in the room. I was almost at the door when her voice stopped me. "Miss Ellis." Not Mara. Miss Ellis. I turned around. She was standing behind her desk. Straight-backed. Hands flat on the surface. The desk between us like a line drawn in wood and steel. "Close the door," she said. The click of the latch in the empty room was the loudest thing I had ever heard. She looked at me for a long moment. And I looked back. And 4 years collapsed into nothing, and we were simply two people in a room with something unfinished between them. "I imagine this is as unexpected for you as it is for me," she said. "More probably," I said. Something flickered in her expression. "Gone before I could name it. I want to be straightforward with you because I think you deserve that." Her voice was measured. Rehearsed, I realized. She had prepared this. "What happened between us 4 years ago? The program, your letter, that was a long time ago. You were a student then and you are a student now, and my responsibility to you has not changed. This course will be conducted with complete professionalism. I will treat you as I treat every other student. I expect the same in return." She paused. "If at any point you feel that arrangement is not manageable, there are processes in place for transferring to another section. I want you to know that option exists." Calm, professional, final. I nodded slowly. Understood. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle. And then, because 4 years of being careful and quiet and okay had apparently used up every last reserve of caution I possessed, I stopped. I turned around one more time. "Can I ask you something?" She said nothing. But she didn't say no. "When you saw me sitting there," I said quietly, "what did you feel?" The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Camille Arden looked at me from across that careful, professional distance. And for just one moment, one single, devastating moment, her composure slipped. "Not much. Just enough." "That," she said softly, "is exactly the kind of question I am not going to answer, Miss Ellis." I held her gaze for one more second. Then I walked out. The hallway was bright and loud and full of students rushing to their next class. I moved through all of it like a ghost, out through the front doors and into the sharp September air, and I stood on the steps and pressed my hand flat against my sternum like I could physically hold the cracked thing inside me together. She hadn't said I felt nothing. He could have. It would have been easy. It would have been the clean, professional, sensible thing to say. She hadn't said it. And as I stood there on those steps with the morning breaking open around me, I understood something with a clarity that frightened me completely. This was not over. It had never been over. And the semester had barely even begun. I walked out of that building on the first day of semester and I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself I was fine. That I was 22 years old and I had survived this once and I could survive it again. That professionalism was possible. That I was stronger than whatever that restless, rattling thing inside my chest was trying to tell me. I almost believed it. Here is something nobody tells you about being in the same room as someone you are trying not to feel things for. It is exhausting. Not the dramatic, visible kind of exhausting. Not the kind anyone can see. It is the quiet kind, the kind that lives entirely behind your eyes and underneath your ribs. The kind that comes from spending 50 minutes twice a week making sure your face says absolutely nothing while your entire interior world is doing something completely different. That was my life for the next 10 weeks. 10 weeks of sitting in my usual seat watching Camille Arden teach. 10 weeks of taking careful notes on authors and texts and literary movements while some separate, traitorous part of my brain cataloged entirely different things. The way she paused before making a point she considered important. The way she pushed her sleeves up when she got passionate about something. The way she moved through the room when she was leading a discussion. Unhurried, deliberate, like every step was considered. 10 weeks of watching her not look at me. Because that was the thing. That was the detail that undid me slowly and completely over the course of those weeks. It wasn't that she ignored me. Ignoring me would have been easier to bear. She called on me in class exactly as often as she called on everyone else. She responded to my comments with the same focused attention she gave every student. She graded my papers with rigorous, impersonal fairness. But she never looked at me directly. Not the way she looked at other students. Openly, easily, without calculation. When her gaze came to me, it landed and moved on with a speed that was just slightly too deliberate. Just slightly too careful. The kind of careful that is its own kind of confession. I noticed. I noticed every single time. And the noticing was its own kind of torture. By the 5th week I had developed what I privately called the system. The system was simple. In class I was a model student. I did the readings. I came prepared. I contributed to discussions thoughtfully and then closed my mouth and took notes like a person with absolutely nothing on their mind except 19th century literary theory. Outside of class I did not think about Camille Arden. I did not think about the way her voice dropped slightly when she said something she truly believed. I did not think about the 2 seconds of stillness on the first day of class when her eyes found mine and something moved across her face like weather. I did not think about what she had said and, more importantly, what she had not said, in that empty classroom when I asked her what she felt. I did not think about any of it. I thought about it constantly. My roommate Jade noticed something was wrong around week 4. Jade was the kind of person who noticed everything and had absolutely no filter about saying so. She appeared in my doorway one Sunday evening while I was supposedly reading, looked at me for about 3 seconds and said, "Okay, who is she?" Not a question. A statement. I looked up from my book. "What?" "You have the face," Jade said, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. "The specific face you get when you're trying very hard not to think about someone. You've had it for weeks. Who is she?" I opened my mouth to deny it. Then I closed it again. Because the thing about having a friend who sees you clearly is that lying to them feels like a betrayal of the one relationship in your life where you are truly known. And I was tired. 10 weeks of careful, exhausting distance had worn me down in ways I hadn't fully measured until that moment. "It's complicated," I said. Jade pulled my desk chair out and sat in it backwards, arms folded over the top. "I have nowhere to be." So I told her. Not everything. Not the letter, not the phone call, not the specific texture of what it had felt like to be 18 and devastated. But enough. I told her about the mentorship program. I told her that the professor was someone I had known before. I told her that there was history and that it was unresolved and that I was handling it. Jade listened to all of it without interrupting, which was rare for her and meant she understood it was serious. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mara, your professor. I know. Your actual current grades signs your academic paperwork, professor." "I know, Jade." She looked at me for a long moment. "And there's something there?" From her side too. I thought about the 2 seconds of stillness. The thing that moved across her face. The answer she had refused to give. I don't know, I said. Maybe. I think maybe. Jade exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. So what are you going to do? And that was the question, wasn't it? The one I had been circling for weeks like a moon trapped in orbit around something it couldn't escape and couldn't reach. Nothing, I said. Right now, nothing. He's still my professor. So, nothing. Jade nodded slowly. She stood up, pushed the chair back, and paused in the doorway. Right now, she repeated, catching the 2 words I had buried in the middle of the sentence like she had been waiting for them. But the semester ends eventually. She left before I could answer. I sat with that thought for a very long time. The breaking point came in week 7. Office hours. I had a legitimate reason to be there. Camille had returned my midterm essay with a grade that surprised me, a grade lower than anything I had received from her all semester, with comments in the margins that were unusually sparse. For her, sparse comments meant something. Camille Arden always had things to say about writing she respected. Silence meant something had gone wrong. I knocked on her office door at 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. She opened it, and for just a fraction of a second, so brief I almost missed it, something moved through her expression before she stepped back and held the door open with perfect composure. Miss Ellis. Come in. Her office was small and warm and lined floor to ceiling with books. There was a desk and 2 chairs and a narrow window that looked out onto the courtyard below. Papers stacked in neat piles. A coffee cup with a small chip on the handle that she clearly hadn't replaced yet. I noticed the chip and filed it away with all the other useless, precious details I had been collecting without permission. I sat in the chair across from her desk. She sat behind it. The physical arrangement of the room doing its usual work of keeping things in their proper place. I put my essay on the desk between us. I wanted to ask about your comments, I said. Or, the lack of them. She looked at the paper. Then at me. Your argument was technically sound, she said. Your structure was clean. Your citations were appropriate. But, a pause. But it was safe, she said. It was the essay of someone who knows exactly how to write an essay. Correct in every measurable way. She paused again. It wasn't you. The words landed somewhere tender. What do you mean it wasn't me? I mean, she said carefully, that I have read your writing, Miss Ellis. I know what you are capable of when you stop being careful. This, she touched the paper lightly, is very careful writing. It is the writing of someone who is trying very hard not to say anything they don't mean to say. The room was very quiet. I looked at her directly. Maybe I learned that from someone. The silence that followed was different from the other silences between us. It had weight. It had shape. It was the kind of silence that exists right before something changes. Camille's hands, which had been resting on the desk, moved. Just slightly. Like she had thought about something and decided against it. Mara, she said. My first name. For the first time since the semester began. 7 letters. She probably didn't realize she had said it. Or maybe she did and she decided the pretense was exhausting her too. She stopped. Started again. I owe you an honest conversation, she said slowly. I am aware that the way I have managed this situation has not been entirely fair to you. Maintaining this distance, treating you as though we are simply strangers. I understand that it has its own effect. Its own cost. I waited. But I need you to understand something, she continued. Her voice was steady but I could hear the effort in it. The careful construction of each sentence. The boundaries I have maintained this semester are not. They are not about indifference. I need you to know that. They are about doing what is right. What is necessary. I know that, I said quietly. Do you? She looked at me then. Really looked at me, the kind of direct, unguarded eye contact she had been so meticulously avoiding for 7 weeks. Because I worry sometimes that from where you're sitting, professionalism looks like not caring. And I would not want you to believe that. My heart was doing something irregular and inconvenient inside my chest. So tell me, I said. My voice was quieter than I intended. If it's not indifference, what is it? And there it was again. The question she couldn't answer. The question that kept finding its way to the surface no matter how carefully we buried it. Camille held my gaze for a long moment. It is the most difficult thing, she said at last, that I have navigated in a very long time. My breath caught. The admission hung between us in the warm, book-lined air of her small office like something irretrievable. Like a word spoken aloud that could not be taken back. He seemed to realize it at the same moment I did. Something shifted in her expression, a flash of something almost like panic, and she straightened in her chair and looked down at the essay on the desk. "Rewrite the 3rd section," she said. Her voice was professional again. "Smooth. Go deeper. Stop being careful. I'll accept it until the end of the week." I stood up slowly. I picked up the essay. I walked to the door. "Camille," I said. She looked up. And I want to remember that moment forever. The way she looked at me when I used her name for the first time, without the title, without the distance. Like I had reached across the carefully maintained space between us and touched something real. "I'll go deeper," I said. "On the essay." A beat. "Good," she said softly. I left. I rewrote the essay that night. All of it, from the beginning, the way she had taught me 4 years ago. Without the protective layer, without the careful distance, going to the painful places without flinching. I wrote about walls. About the particular architecture of the defenses we build after we've been hurt. About how sometimes those walls stop being protection and start being prisons. About how the bravest thing a person can do is not to never get hurt, but to remain open to the possibility of being hurt again, knowing this time exactly what it costs. I did not think about the fact that she would read it and understand precisely what it was about. I thought about it the entire time. She returned it 3 days later with a single line at the top, in her clean, precise handwriting. "This is the bravest thing you have written since I have known you." The last day of the semester arrived on a Thursday morning in December. I had been awake since 5. I lay in the gray pre-dawn stillness of my bedroom and I thought about the 10 weeks behind me and the conversation ahead of me and the particular terrifying freedom that comes from knowing that today, after today, there was no more structure. No more designated roles. No more desk between us doing the work of keeping things in their proper place. After today, she was not my professor anymore. I had thought about this day since week 2. I had imagined it various ways. Brave versions, cowardly versions, versions where I said nothing and simply let it all dissolve quietly into the past the way sensible people probably would. I had talked to Jade about it twice and both times she had said the same thing. "You already know what you're going to do, Mara. You've always known." He was right. I had always known. I just needed to be sure I was doing it for the right reason. Not out of old pain resurfacing. Not out of stubbornness or the need to finish something I had started at 18. But because I was 22 years old and I was standing in my own life with clear eyes and I knew, with the same quiet, unshakable certainty that good writing always has, that what existed between us was real. It had always been real. And it deserved the chance to find out what it could become. I got up. I got dressed. I walked to campus in the cold December morning with my breath making small clouds in the air and my heart running slightly ahead of the rest of me. The final class was quiet in the way final things often are. There was something elegiac about it. The last discussion, the last exchange of ideas in that room, the last time this particular group of people would sit together with these particular books between them. Camille led it beautifully. Of course she did. She spoke about the authors we had studied, their courage, their honesty, the ways they had used language to reach across the distance between one human life and another. I watched her the way I had watched her all semester, collecting details without permission. But today I let myself do it without guilt. Today I was just a person watching someone they loved talk about the thing they loved most. Clean and simple. No box. No lock. When the class ended, students gathered their things and said their goodbyes and filtered out in ones and twos. I heard someone say, "Great course," and someone else laugh about something. The ordinary, beloved noise of an ending. I stayed in my seat. The room emptied. Camille stood at the front, sliding papers into her bag, and for a moment she seemed entirely focused on that task. Or was performing focus on that task. And the room got quieter and quieter until the last footsteps faded down the hallway and it was just the two of us again. The way it always seemed to come back to. She looked up. "Miss Ellis," she said, and then she stopped. And something in her expression shifted, the professional mask loosening just slightly at the edges. "Mara." I stood up from my chair. "It's the last day," I said. "I know. You're not my professor anymore. As of," I checked the clock on the wall. 11 minutes ago. Something moved through her expression that might, on another face, have been the beginning of a smile. "I'm aware of that." I walked toward her slowly. Not rushing. There was no need to rush anymore. We had all the time that was left, and for the first time in 4 months, none of the rules. I stopped a few feet away from her. "I'm going to ask you something," I said. "And this time I'm not 18 and I'm not putting it in a letter, and I'm not going to spend another 4 years wondering what you actually meant." I looked at her steadily. "I'm just going to ask." She was very still. "What do you want, Camille?" The question fell into the silence of the empty room and sat there, patient and clear. Camille set her bag down on the desk. She looked at me, fully, openly, without the careful managed distance of the past 10 weeks. And I watched something happen in her expression that I had never seen there before. Something letting go. Something that had been held tightly for a very long time finally, carefully releasing. "I have been asking myself that question," she said quietly, "for approximately 10 weeks and 3 days. And..." She was quiet for a moment. Outside in the hallway, someone laughed, bright and distant, already belonging to a different story. She stopped. Started again. "I have spent a great deal of energy over the past several years being sensible," she said. "Being appropriate. Doing the right thing. And I do not regret any of it." A pause. "But I have also spent a great deal of energy trying to convince myself that what I feel when I am in the same room as you is something manageable. Something I can categorize and contain and file away neatly." She looked at me. "I am not as good at that as I thought I was." My heart was very loud. "So what are you saying?" I asked softly. "I am saying," Camille said with the careful precision of someone who has decided to tell the truth all the way, "that I would very much like to have coffee with you. Not as your professor. Not as your mentor." The smallest, most tentative smile I had ever seen on her face. Just as myself. Something opened in my chest, wide and warm and completely undefended. "I know a place," I said. We walked out of the building together into the cold December morning. The campus was quiet, most students already gone for winter break. Our footsteps were loud on the empty path. Our breath made small clouds in the air. We were not touching, not yet, not quite, but we were close, close enough that the space between us felt different from any other space. Charged, deliberate, full of something that was just beginning. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from campus. Small, warm, smelling of espresso and old wood. We found a table near the window and we sat across from each other, and for a moment we were both quiet, and it was the most comfortable silence I had ever shared with another person. Then Camille looked at me and said, "Tell me something true. Not from an essay." And I laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of me, and she looked startled for a moment and then she laughed too, and it was the first time I had ever heard her laugh like that. Unguarded, unperformed, like something she had been keeping in a box of her own for a very long time. We talked for 3 hours. We talked about books and fear and the strange ways time rearranges a life. We talked about the program 4 years ago and the letter I had written, and she told me, quietly, honestly, the way she did everything, that saying no that day had been the right thing to do and also one of the hardest things she had ever done. I told her that I had known, somewhere underneath the devastation, that I had understood even then. "It made me trust you more," I said. "Even while it broke my heart. That's a strange thing to carry." She looked at me across the small table. "You carried it with a great deal of grace," she said softly. "I cried for 3 days," I said. "That's not incompatible with grace." Outside the window, the December sky was doing something quietly beautiful. The light going gold and low over the rooftops, the kind of afternoon that feels like the world is exhaling. I watched it for a moment and then I looked back at her. "I'm glad it was you," I said. "The professor. I'm glad it was you who walked into that room." Camille looked at me for a long, still moment. And this time she did not look away. She did not pack it up or manage it or return to composure. She just looked at me. Openly, completely. "So am I," she said. We walked out into the golden late afternoon together. She reached out, carefully, deliberately, like a choice being made in real time, and her hand found mine. We walked like that through the cold and the fading light, past the bare winter trees and the empty paths and all the ordinary beautiful details of a world that had no idea what had just happened inside it. It wasn't the end of every complicated thing between us. There was still history to sit with. Still the slow, patient work of learning each other on entirely new terms. Still the quiet courage it takes to let someone pass the walls you've spent years perfecting. But for the first time in 4 years, neither of us was pretending. Neither of us was standing on the wrong side of a line drawn in silence and distance and careful, necessary rules. We were just 2 people walking into the same future, finally facing the same direction. And the path ahead was open. And it was ours. That is where my story ends. But I have been thinking about you. The person watching this right now. Maybe you are sitting with something similar. A feeling you buried, a name you stopped letting yourself say out loud, a chapter you closed before it was truly finished. I want you to hear this from someone who lived it. Some things are not over just because you decided they were. Some loves are simply waiting, quietly, patiently, for both people to finally be ready. For the rules to fall away. For one honest moment in an empty room where someone finally says the true thing out loud. I almost missed mine. I almost let 4 years become forever. Don't let yours slip past you because you were too afraid to find out what it could become. Be brave. Go deeper. Stop being careful. Someone very wise once told me that. And she was right about everything. This has been Love Beyond Rules. I'm Mara Ellis. Thank you for staying with me until the end.